Well, hey, everybody. Welcome.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, it's Chris and David in the house today. David, glad to have you back for another episode of We Got Balls.
Glad to be here, Chris. Thanks for asking me to be a part. I'm excited about what's going on with you guys. Things continue to grow, and people are getting help and finding out information, and love to be a part.
It's always great. David's been a longtime supporter of the We Got Balls channel, and so grateful to have him back with Scott out today. Scott is in Houston celebrating his birthday. His birthday is in a few days, and he's got some guys in town. So we want to celebrate Scott. Happy birthday, Scott. Woo
Yeah,
woo. I hope you're listening.
exactly. Happy birthday, Scott. Absolutely.
So, hello, everybody. Journey Protector calling in from Kansas City. Orson Tate from NorCal. Hey, Manny. Hey, Just a Dude. Hey, Barry. Hey, Longhorn. Glad you guys are here. Barry calling in from Chicago. And we're in the middle of about a 2-week long series on families, David. And so you just jumped into the deep end with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely talking about family will definitely put us all into the deep end, no question.
Yeah. And so when we're having this conversation today, we're going to kind of put a bow on some of these things. We're going to talk about some of the ways that we can address our family issues and our family stories and do some healing, because that's one of the things that we definitely want to do, instead of just leaving it stuck in this left open, raw state of having these experiences with mom and dad or in your family of origin that really just make you feel like, I can't believe this happened. This is so heavy. This is so deep. We want to give a little bit of curiosity around your story so that you can offer a little bit of healing with you today. So, Ricky, glad you're here. Hey, Kyle. Carrie, glad you're on board. JP, thanks for wishing Scott happy birthday, because he's, I think he turned 63 this year, which is an exciting thing for Scott to do. He's still a young man. I mean, I don't look at Scott and see 63, but he's definitely there. So
Definitely not. No question. He's way more current than most 63-year-olds for sure.
So in the last couple episodes, and you guys, if you're in the chat, glad you're here. Smash that like button for us. If you're already on the call, we'd love to have you promote this for YouTube and the rest of the folks on the interwebs to join us and to be able to engage in this content. We talked a lot about Ricky, hey man, you've been a member for 4 months. Glad you're here. We talked a lot about there's some particular wounds that happen in your family of origin. And when we talk about family of origin, David, what's the first thing for you that comes to mind?
The first thing, family of origin, actually for me, because where I grew up in North Carolina, actually involves, certainly makes me think about my parents, but it also makes me think about both sets of my grandparents. We lived pretty close to them, and so there was always a lot of big family involvement and engagement across the board. So it definitely makes me think about that. It also makes me think about both the successful moments and experiences, and then also some of the challenges that have come with family of origin as well.
Yeah, when I think about my family of origin story, which we're going to talk about today, there's so much in my story. I mean, there's kind of a hinge to the story at 9 years old. Before 9 years old, I have a lot of positive memories. I have memories of going to the beach with my mom and dad and sister and grandparents. I have memories of family birthday parties, of playing in the backyard, on my treehouse, of spending time with my dad at baseball practice, of doing things around the house with my mom, and all these different dynamics. And then kind of 9 hits, and all the things that I was not really seeing too well as a young boy kind of come into clear perspective. And so then I began to see the harm, the shortfalls of mom and dad, the anxiety of mom, the workaholism of dad, the things that I struggle with, and have kind of begun to tell that story of. And part of what I've struggled to understand in my story is that I couldn't see those things because my family was just my family. It was just normal. And I think a lot of times when we talk about family of origin, the first thing we can do to offer some healing and some kindness to our family story is to understand we don't have a clear perspective of it when it's happening. It is just what
Right.
is the mold that we're baked into.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a normal, what becomes normal. We don't know the difference between that because it's our family, and it's
Yeah.
where we are, where we live with. We see little bits and pieces of it from other people and other experiences when we start making comparisons and those types of things. But for certain, for me, I think. I think the reality it didn't hit at age 9. I think it hit 13, 14. Some of the challenges of that were going on with family, and in particular with my dad and I, we wrestled quite a bit in that 13 to 19 range, and probably did with my mom too. But the reality, the reality is this: I have a younger brother that's 7 years younger than me,
Mm.
and the way that they were parenting him versus how the way they had been parenting me was vastly different. And so that was super confusing, around age 14. When I was 21, we went on a beach trip, and my brother's girlfriend went, and my brother was
Oh,
14 at the time. My brother was 14 at the time, and um, let's just say I had a discussion with my parents about how different things were. So.
yeah. When you were 14, there's no way that would have happened, I would imagine. That's probably
Oh my
totally
gosh.
different
When
dynamics.
exactly when I was 14, my I think my dad said something to the line of, if you ever get caught with drugs and you get put in jail, I'm not getting you out.
Ooh,
There was definitely some of those kinds of conversations, and my parents weren't drinking alcohol at all during that period of time. They were definitely teetotalers, and yet my 14-year-old brother was drinking beer. So, hey, well, okay, very, very
that's
different
a
scenarios.
huge shift in 7 years. And
Hmm.
it brings about part of understanding your family story of that birth order matters. When we're
Hmm.
making peace with our family story, there is an aspect in which, am I the oldest child, the oldest son? Am I what's called the golden child, which means the one who your parents look to and esteem as the one who can't do anything wrong? Am I the
Hmm.
black sheep? You know, the child who's always getting
Absolutely.
in trouble, or am I the youngest, or somewhere in the middle?
Hmm.
So all those dynamics in our family story play into understanding, because, and I forget who said this. I think it was Adam Young that said this. He said that no family has the same. No, it was Dan Siegel. No family has the same experience. No family member has the same experience growing up in their family dynamic. Every child's experience growing up um, is different because of the birth order dynamic, because of the roles that they play in the family's dynamic.
Hmm.
Longhorn 40 says, "Why do you think there was such a shift in your family dynamic from the time you were 14 until your brother was 14?"
Well, I think a part of that was, they were realizing some of the mistakes that they made with me. In all likelihood, they definitely think there was that, and then also, my brother and my dad were definitely and still are definitely still super super close, and so there's definitely some differences in that. I think quite frankly, I think the stronger my parents' relationship became with God and the church, the more chilled out they became. My dad grew up in a pretty rigid environment, and my mom's was definitely a more moderate environment as far as that's concerned. But I honestly kind of chalk it up to being aware of some of the mistakes that they made with me. I mean, we've talked about it some, obviously, as time's gone on and working through the healing process of different aspects of it. But we've definitely talked about it. But I honestly think it's my parents relaxing a little bit, that in a good way, that was what caused the shift. It was confusing
Wow.
though. It was confusing for me, at that age, for sure. I mean, at 21, 20, even 21, 25, I'm kind of like, what gives? I mean, my brother is getting away with murder. So, of
Yeah.
course, but of course, he's the priest now. So, hey, things come full
Interesting.
circle.
Interesting. Get close to God, drink at 14, and become a priest. That's how that works, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
that's the family dynamic that we're aspiring for. So, what Another aspect of understanding your family story is, what are some things that your family never talked about when you were growing up, and how did that kind of shape you? I know for me, one of the things my family never talked about was my grandmother's mental illness. That my
Mm,
mom's mom, and I referenced this on our last episode when we talked about mother wounds. My mom's mom was in a mental institution for much of her childhood, and then she got breast cancer later
mm,
in life. And so, really, the dominating part of the narrative around her was she's sick. She's been in the hospital. She's doing treatments. And so there's a lot of empathy and care for her at the time when I knew her as grandmother. But for a whole section of their lives, there was this family secret around my
mm,
grandmother not being around. She was in a mental institution. She at one time fled away from the mental institution and lived in Florida for about 3 or 4 years, and they really didn't know where she was. This will be back in the 60s, so it was a
wow.
50s and 60s. So that was a different time, a different stage. But what
Hmm.
in your life was there a silence about growing up that you've since come to know that there is a deeper story to it, if you're willing to share, or maybe somebody
Sure.
else's story that you've engaged with?
Sure. I mean, along the way, there were not necessarily major family secrets as far as the family at large. One of my grandparents, I'm pretty confident, struggled with alcoholism, and it wasn't talked about. That definitely wasn't talked about, but there was always a tension dynamic with regards to that. But ultimately, I think the primary thing in my family of origin that wasn't talked about, unless there was something terrible going on, was really the issue of sex. Sex was
Mm,
always perceived as I always perceived it as a dirty thing and a borderline evil kind of a thing, with regards to the way it was talked about and what happened. And of course, the first time my parents ever really interacted with the subject with me is when I was caught with some pornography and things like that around age
wow.
13, and that was a pretty difficult season. And basically, my parents approached it. It was basically a one-time conversation, and a pretty intense one at that. And certainly a lot of shame from that, and I started carrying shame around about it. So that's I don't know that that's a family secret, but as much as it's just something that wasn't really talked about that much. I'm sure there were other things. I may think of other things as we go along in the episode here.
Yeah, for sure. And that's how that kind of reveals as you begin to talk things out. Oh, I didn't think about that. I'd forgotten about that. So, guys, love to hear your stories of your family of origin and the things that you have learned and are still learning about your families. Put that in the chat. We'd love to engage that with you. Any questions that you might have around these issues. Another question is, have you ever tried retelling your story about your parents and sharing it with
Mm,
them? Oh, that's a big challenge
mm,
for me, and I can speak about that. I'll talk more about that later in the episode. But for me, I began to be challenged with the things in my own life where I didn't really understand why something had happened, specifically
mm,
around an event where my dad got remarried when I was 15 years old. And so when I was in that
mm,
place, I was struggling with being honest and vulnerable about how I felt about that. And so I wrote that story down. In fact, I wrote that story down and shared it to a number of guys. And Scott was in that group of guys that I shared it with. I got some
mm,
amazing feedback from those guys. And when I was processing through that story, I was also talking with the counselor who was leading our group. And he said, have you ever shared this story with your dad? I'm like, wow, this is a
mm,
story about my dad when I was 15 years old. I think, he might want to hear that from me. And so I wrote it down and got to a place where I could sit down with him over a lunch and begin to tell that
mm,
story to him. And, at first he received it. And then as he began to process through it, I think he sensed a lot of guilt and shame around the way that was handled, because some of the things that were said and done in the story were very much about making sure that he was cared for and his priorities were valued. And there were some things in my story that I felt like weren't seen, that I was kind of drug along in this experience at the time with his current wife. It was my stepmom, and they'd been married at that time for over 20 years. And so I began to tell this story to him, and he gets defensive. And he starts
Mm.
talking about, well, this maybe wasn't exactly right, or these are some things in the story that I would change. And he was struggling to hear me. So as we've done this, I think these things are they're a challenge to do, because if I'm going to heal my family story, at some point I've got to be honest about what really went on. That's why
Mm.
I really feel like there's a lot of difficulty in processing through family stories, because they're so closely held and they're such guarded, almost secrets, commonly held secrets, but we just don't talk about that. So,
Yeah, man, no question. We don't really talk about that. And as we're talking about this, I just remembered, last summer, last July, actually, we spent some time in the North Carolina mountains or at the
mhm,
retreat, and part of the story that I shared definitely was front and center for me. And right after that, I actually ended up spending some time with my family, and that honesty that you're talking about, as far as that being able to bring healing. We definitely had some difficult things to talk about that I needed to bring up. And what was interesting, is the more honest got, there was definitely some defensiveness around it, but by the
mhm,
same token, then it came full circle, and there was actually a lot of ownership that transpired in our conversation, which quite frankly has allowed me to be able to let it go. There
mm,
was some really hard things that we were dealing with, or that I was dealing with regards to both shame and even on the my dad grew up in a very physical environment with regards to discipline and things like that, and he and my mom were pretty physical in their discipline of my brother and I. And that is something that we really need to talk about and talk through. And that it because it was really, it was something that was sticking in me, that was really hard to wrestle through. And then even owning some of my own physicality with the kids and the anger dynamic.
yeah,
One of the key things I think I realized in that, and have walked through it from a story perspective, is the difference between anger and positive discipline and rage. There were
mm,
quite a few things that popped up in the rage category, that I witnessed and experienced, and then even again, even as myself, uh, realized I was raging, as opposed to I was raging, having fear about the dynamics that were happening with regards to parenting. So, but there's definitely been a lot of healing around that, and some through difficult conversations. But I'm really glad that I did it, and would encourage anyone who's wrestling through that stuff. If you can take the risk, and you have a relationship with your parents, I think those conversations can do nothing but they can bring pain. I'm not going to lie.
yes.
They can bring up hurt. Not going to lie about that. It's hard, but on the other side of it, the freedom that comes from it, and the shame dropping that comes from it on all sides, I think is a good dynamic.
I agree. And it is a challenging thing to be honest about. And there's a ton of guys in the chat who have just offered up some wonderful pieces to their story. If you're listening live right now, I'd encourage you smash that like button for us and promote this content to YouTube, so that we can encourage these kind of stories of vulnerability to be shared. Warren said, after Wednesday, I thought about my mom's generation. We talked about mother wounds. So this applies to my family story today. Mom was just a bit too early for feminism and equality. If she'd have been born 10 to 20 years later, maybe she wouldn't have been a stay-at-home mom, highly educated. But if she
Mm.
resented it, she never showed it. Kindness abounding. So again, when we're telling our family stories, there's positives and negatives to be shared. So you
Hmm.
sound, Warren, sounds like your mom was there enduring the environment that she was in, and offering you guys something that she wanted you to carry on, which is an experience of kindness. So, Journey Protector says, my mom discovered gay porn in my browsing history in my teens in the 90s. She asked me if I was gay. I couldn't share anything with her about that. After that, I'm in my early 40s and it still hurts. Those kind of things. And
Mm,
I won't read the word that he said, but he didn't say gay. It was a pejorative term that people use, and to wonder if someone is homosexual, if is same sex attracted. And,
mm,
that's a hurtful term for your mother to say to you. If you wonder what it is,
mm,
starts with an F, ends with a
mm,
G, and you know what's in between.
mm,
Because for mom to ask me, "Are you this?" is so hurtful and
mm,
uh, so painful. So, Carrie says, my father outright rejected any idea that I could know anything about my family before the age of 8. Uh, as he was concerned, my memories, the few that I had, were not real. And I know Carrie's story is heartbreaking when it comes to his engagement with his mom and his dad, and it's such a difficult one to be honest about because it involves the loss of both parents, from an active
mm,
part of parenting in his life. Just a Dude said, my dad told me once, I love you, but I don't like you. That stayed with me
mm,
even after his death. Oh my gosh, David, what
mm.
what what would that bring up for you if you had a father who said, I love you, but I don't like you?
Oh man, I mean, for me, being firstborn and being so performance driven, so performance oriented, I would have probably worked the rest of my life try to gain that acceptance,
Mm,
and yet still felt the ongoing pain of that. It would definitely replay in my mind. Uh, I can imagine that actually replaying in my mind anytime I saw other negative parenting, or even had conversations with guys that were talking about the positive aspects of their
yep.
relationship with their dad. I know that would be as ongoing hurt and pain for certain.
Mm, mm. That's the kind of relationship disrupting statement that can leave a
Mm,
wound, as you said. Just a dude that stayed with you even after his his death, because it
mm,
really is a mark on your masculinity when your father says, I don't like you. Even if he says, I love you,
mm,
he says, I don't like you. Carrie
mm,
goes on talking about his dad. With the interaction with his father was the end of the discussion. We didn't discuss anything after that, and my past was just an imagination as a child. So, Dewey
mm,
says, I'm facing tackling my family of origin story after both my parents have passed away. It's a different dynamic trying to understand it and focus on it. Absolutely. Um, that is one of the challenges of doing this work, Dewey, and I know you're doing it faithfully, is to be able to engage these stories when your parents are no longer with you. Because it does feel like you're dishonoring their memory in some senses. And David, I know
mm,
we've dealt with a bunch of guys who are later in life and they're trying to do some of this work and trying to heal their family of origin story. And so you got to have the balance of what we talked about earlier, which is there's positives to be shared, there's good memories,
mhm,
there's blessings. I know very early on in the retreats that we did, we wrote stories of blessing and we wrote stories of harm about what we experienced growing up. And so when we
mm.
have these dynamics, we need to tell both sides of the story. And it seems easier to tell the harm sometimes, David, than it is to tell the blessing, don't you
Mm.
think?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely think that's hard. And one of the reasons is I think some of the negativity of both the culture as well as things that happen. It's hard to not stay focused on those things because
Mm,
if there's not a problem, then we don't tend to think about it. We kind of take it for granted. But I think one of the things that's been helpful for me is practicing some gratitude around some of the family of origin things. I recently attended my aunt's funeral, and it was amazing how much family gathered for that, and we all got to talk about some of the positives of the blessings of our grandmother that basically kept the whole family together. As I grew up, we every holiday was a meal at my grandparents'
Mm.
house, at my dad's parents' house, and so his all of his brothers and sisters and all of the cousins, we were all always together all of the time, and there is a real blessing as far as family lineages, those kinds of things. So that again, that remembering those kinds of things, and at the same time, I remember that same grandmother cutting kids' hair on their way to church to make sure that their hair was above their ears. So you got all of those kinds of
The both
things.
and yeah,
You got the both and.
yeah, that's it. So, JP asks, how do you open up the box of family stories? JP, that's a great question. And I think
Mm,
the first thing you can do is begin to tell your experience in your family dynamic. And that is, David, when we have a lot of guys that show up at retreats and start doing groups together, we have them share their story to kind of just start the process. And they come in and they usually start something like this. They say, I grew up in a good home. My mom and dad loved me. We went to church. And there's
mhm,
this very platitudinal, very benign exploration of your childhood. And I
mhm.
think what that is doing is trying to tell some of the goodness of your family story without dumping all the shit out and
Mhm.
investigating it. But I think you have to hold both of those things in tension. Did you grow up in a
Abs-
good family home? I don't know. So
mhm. Absolutely, and I've experienced that both personally, but then again at the retreats as well. You and Chris have both talked about, and I think Adam Young and maybe Dan Allender as well is talking about, and oh gosh, his name is escaping my brain. But talked about the ability to honor your parents, and the way that the honor
mhm,
your parents is to tell all of the truth, not just the shaded version of the truth or the image management version of it, but honoring your parents is the whole picture, not just a portion of the picture. And for me, again, I know up at least up until age 30, I really kept a I kind of had a utopian version of my family of origin and dynamics and all
mm,
the different things because it's all I really knew. And then the more I explored and the more, different pains and different hurts and different experiences that I had, and was, trying to understand, where are some of these things coming from. I found the balance in those. But definitely, on one of the things I love about having learned at the retreats, as well as some of the other readings and things that you guys have recommended, is honoring your parents involves the whole picture.
yeah, and it does involve being honest at some point about your own personal experience,
Hmm.
which is that
And
there were
choices.
good yeah, and choices. There were good things that happened to me, and there were things that hurt that happened to me. We talk about those as
Mm,
harms. And that's where we can really begin to open up that box. Because when I begin to talk about the things that hurt, I invite other people's empathy into my story. And
mm,
I can invite them to be compassionate for me and with me and help me tell my story in my family. As we talked about earlier, each child has a unique story in their family because of birth order and family dynamics and roles. And so no child has the same parents, and even in the same family, because they experience
mm,
something different. And so when we're in that place of trying to make sense of that, each child can say, this happened. You remember when this happened? You remember when this happened? And you say, yeah, I remember it, but they may have experienced it different ways. So to
mhm,
open up that box requires an individual to be honest about their personal experiences, their feelings, their thoughts, and to have other people reflect that back to them so that they can begin to make sense of their story and begin to heal it.
mm,
There is no healing of someone's story unless you begin to tell it truthfully. And again, you're not
mm,
lying. And when I say truthful, it means how it resonates with you in your body.
mm,
Um, so there's so much there. I mean, Steve B, the worst thing my mother ever said to me, I was the seed of Satan to destroy the family and I wasn't good enough for it to be her son. That sounds like some emotional pain from Steve B's mom directed at him, because
mm,
none of those things are true about any person.
mm,
Nobody is the seed of Satan meant to destroy their family. So,
mm,
that is the real challenge to opening these things up is being able to get a perspective that's different from the way it feels in your body
Hmm.
around what's going on. Manny H says, recently my sister passed away, and my biological parents and relatives who consider my parents passed away also. It's really hard to process my own story without immediate family members. Manny,
Hmm.
that's something I hear all the time. And David, I know you hear it as well. How are some ways that guys can process their story, even when they don't have family of reference, to begin to get to the data they think they need? Data in quotation
Man,
marks.
the key thing that I would say is don't try to do it solo.
Mm,
Trying to process story. Journaling is one thing that's certainly helpful, but I think the first thing I would recommend is getting into a men's story group or a men's, basically a men's discussion group of some of what you and Chris offer and you and I do together on Wednesday nights. I think it's important to be able to process stories because it's important that we get reflection. As I've shared several different stories, I've been amazed at the things that I couldn't see. I could only see basic maybe 180 degrees, but there's another 180 degrees that was missing. And so I think experiencing some of those things with other men and being able to talk about it honestly and share, and again get feedback, getting the feedback from other guys. And again, there's no way to sugarcoat this. It's also being willing to embrace some pain and some
yep.
hurt along
Yep.
the way, in addition to following the path, believing and hoping that you're going to receive some both acceptance and love and being soothed and seen inside of those groups. So that's a huge dynamic that I would recommend for someone walking through that process.
Mm. And so much of what we do is being able to tell more truly our stories by having empathetic listeners reflect back to us what they hear. And
Mm.
so,
Mm.
RMC, and I know he's done a lot of work around this, is I was a responsible kid, and I think I always blame myself for the things that happened to me. I'm beginning to see that I needed my parents to help me guide me through my emotional responses, and that's the rub of this whole situation is that we're in an environment now where we really needed our parents to help us make sense of what was happening in our family. We needed them to be honest. We needed them to
Mm.
tell their stories more truly to us, which is one way that you
Mm.
can help heal your family of origin wounds is do your own work so you can tell to your family and those that come behind you, maybe even your own kids, the
Mhm.
dynamics of your family of origin so they can understand what made you tick. You talked about earlier, how sometimes parenting turns into rage. Well, there's a reason why that rage shows up is
Mm.
because a lot of times that's stuck emotions that I'm processing through and don't know how to deliver. So it comes out with a lot of energy, right?
Yeah, it comes out sideways. And one of the key things that I've realized along the way is if I'm feeling fear, if I'm not being honest about that fear, it can come out as rage. I want it
Hmm.
to change. I want to control it. Well, I don't want to, but I overthink about it and wear it out. And so then if something else interrupts that process, such as a work dynamic or a tough
Yep.
relationship with work or anything. Again, different emotions can come out sideways if we're not really dealing with a lot of those issues. One of the things I was been really honest with both of my children about the sexual abuse that I received as a
Mm.
kid, and that was a hard thing to do, but it was also something that there's been many blessings to come from it. I've watched both of my children make really wise choices with regards to those issues, and it's opened the door for conversations where we're able to have great dynamic situations. I'm definitely not the perfect dad. They're not the perfect kids, but we can be honest about things when we're all wrestling with stuff.
And that's a beautiful dynamic to model. It can't be something that you teach. You have to model it. And sounds like you're modeling with your kids. And what I've tried to model for my own kids in healing my family story, which is one of the strategies you can use, is to just be honest about what's happened to you. I've told them my story and my struggles and my brokenness, and all of them see me, instead of rather this guy they've got to revere and respect, as a man who is a human being just like they are and is going to
Mm,
struggle and loves them very much, but also is not infallible. And so
mhm,
we have that environment that we set for our kids and we set for those who we're in relationship with. It totally changes the dynamic around being honest about your story. It's not about getting it right. It's about
mm,
being empathetic and compassionate and understanding that the truth of the story is continuing to be told as it unfolds in my understanding. What I mean by
mm,
that is I will never get to a place where I fully understand my story. I will understand it better
mm,
and better as I go through it. But the reality is, I am always going to be doing work around this so that I can know myself, because there's plenty of me that I've experienced that I
mm,
don't know how to explain. Does that make
mm.
sense, David? Am I
It make
communicating that all right?
it does make it makes sense to me, and it's a place that I, again, I continue to explore, some of the choices that I've made, and there were some of the reasons I think the way that I do and feel the way that I feel in different environments. And the more that I explore my story, and take it to God and others, the more whole I have felt along the way, and experienced life. And it's been freeing. It definitely been freeing as far as that's concerned. But it's going to be a continual work. I early on, I was thinking, in some early therapy, I was thinking, okay, I'll do six sessions of therapy, and this will
Yes.
be over.
The
Um,
magic
or
6
then,
sessions, it always
or
fixes
then,
you, right?
or then I'll attend another conference, or I'll read another book, or
Yes.
I'll, all of the different things, and then this will all be over, and I'll put it all back in the box, and I'll move forward.
Right.
Well, that's not the way it works.
No.
That's definitely not the way it works.
And so, as we begin to really heal our family story and better understand it, telling ourselves our family story and then sharing our family story with other people, it can be difficult. It's
Mm,
easy. Sometimes it's easier with siblings because they have a little more empathy and they've kind of gone through the same scenarios that you did. Sometimes I've heard lots of examples when I began to tell my story, and guys talk up to their siblings. The siblings are like, "Well, that's not how I remember it," and they totally shut them down. So there's a
mm,
whole lot that's there in communicating your story to your family, but telling it to your siblings, especially telling it to your children, so that you can have that change of dynamic with your children and them not recreate the things that you were given. It'd be a different dynamic moving forward. But if you can tell them to your parents, even, that's a powerful way to impact your own standing up for yourself. I could say when I told my story to my dad, the one thing that I was able to feel in my own body was the fact that I was now a man. I had broken
mm.
the honor code with my dad, that he was the one that drove the narrative and he was the one who decided what we talked about. Finally, I said something that I needed to say man to man and changed the relationship that we had because I told
Mm.
my story about my story to my dad.
Wow,
You
that's
know,
awesome, Chris. Chris, I'm glad that you did that and had that experience. That that I think that's what you just brought up is huge.
Mhm.
I don't know many men. I really don't know many men who've dealt with their father issues, to a good healthy extent. And so being able to have that conversation with your dad, and you be carrying the mantle now and know that you're carrying the mantle, that's a tremendous healing process. And I know that did not come overnight. It did not.
No.
It
And I
definitely
felt
did
it in
not.
the moment, but the reality was I haven't realized it until much later, is that it's my job to take care of me. And that's another thing when we talk about uh, healing your family story, is it's my job to take care of me. It's your job to take care of you, David. Each man listening,
Mm,
it's your job to take care of you. You need to do whatever you need to do to care for yourself in your family system. And that includes setting boundaries, maybe limiting
mm,
contact, refraining from enmeshing behavior, or a number of other things. When you get sucked back into that old family dynamic, it's not going to help you mature and grow and heal. You have to
Mm,
be a man who is responsible for himself. And that's part of this, it says it in scripture, is that we should leave and cleave. It's our job to
mm,
leave the family dynamic and create something new for ourselves. And
mm,
so that's a really hard thing to say, but it may be part of how you heal in your family story, is to create
mm,
some space for you to be a man who cares for himself. And
mm,
lastly, a last resort is limiting contact with particularly harmful or self-involved family members. This is going to give you the time and the space that you need to do the work of self-care. And David, that's the hardest thing for me, is I have had to draw boundaries with family members and say, we don't need to be talking right now, or at least talking about
mm,
these things right now. And
mm,
that's been sad, because I
mm,
love those people in my family, but I also know that no, they're not caring for me when
mm,
they're keeping me in that old family system, in that old family
mm.
of origin dynamic. They're preserving what they think is true and right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, setting boundaries, and all of those things can be really difficult, because there is a way that all of us have been relating together or not relating
Mhm.
together as far as family dysfunction is concerned. And but setting boundaries is something that's been really hard for me to do. And but yet the more that I've done it, the better off, quite frankly, that all of the parties have been,
Yeah.
with regards to that. And you brought up enmeshment, again, being firstborn, and so with regards to some of the other dynamics, I grew up feeling like I had to take care of everybody, and
Mm,
and therefore put myself at the back of the line. And even some of the church teaching stuff of being selfless. Well, that the elements of that, I think the intent of being selfless is giving from what you have. But if you don't have something, you can't
yep.
really give it.
Yep.
And and so getting into that performative basis of basically managing people's emotions, is a really difficult dynamic. But setting boundaries around that for a period of time and not doing that, um,
Yes.
helped me understand when I was doing it and when I wasn't doing it.
It helps you create the space that you need to be honest about what you need. And that's the last thing I want to leave the guys with, is you
Mm,
have to be honest about what you need. And if your family is not creating space to care for you and help you grow and flourish and help you become the man that you're meant to be, then you got to be honest about what it is that you need and how you can get that. And sometimes that
mm,
means making hard decisions. It means telling hard truths. It means being uh, a man who's going to
mm.
stand up and say, this is what's important to me. And I have to act on this, because nobody else is going to come rescue you. I think
Yeah,
that's
and
the
that's
misnomer that people have.
Yeah, man, and what you just tapped into there is a significant thing. Knowing what you need is actually one of the most difficult the
Hmm.
difficult parts. I There were definitely a period of time in my life when I did not know what I needed. And I don't That was from me, again, being performative and trying to people please for everybody else, and burying some of those needs, not even knowing that I was burying some of those needs. But how we identify those needs, again, comes from being in relationship with trusted people where you can ask questions, trusted
Mm,
empathetic people where you can ask questions and feel open to be able to be asked questions, and then process it and go through it. But that's definitely hard. It's definitely one of the things that comes with the man card, for sure.
yep. Gary says, despite my father's response, I was free to speak up and address the past. I even tried to reconcile the situation, but ultimately he became aggressive, demeaning, and disrespectful. So I had to become the man that I chose to be and set boundaries to establish that he's not in control of me. That's a man card,
Mm,
Gary. That's you
mm,
taking care of yourself. I think that's why you're on this journey right now, is because you're willing to say no to those demeaning and harmful family dynamics that you experience. But
Mhm.
Harry says this as well. It says, I feel like I've come to take care of everyone. It's difficult to overcome. These are dynamics in your story that we have to continue to address, because the ways we operate in our family are hardwired, David. They're not something
Mhm.
that we can logically explain. I just do what I do in my family system, and that's kind of
Mhm.
where I'm at. So, um, uh, there's so much in there that needs to be cared for, and that's why it can only be done in community. And so I
Mhm.
just invite guys that want to do this work to really reach out to us. WeGotBallsPod.com. Come to a retreat, join a group, be a part of a dynamic where you can do this work. Like David, we do every week. We sit down and we
Mhm.
talk about these things, and you see how they kind of come out with the guys in the groups, and your own story and my own story. And
Absolutely.
it's organic. It's not cause and effect. It's not performative. It's not really intellectual. It's baked so deep that it just kind of leaks out sideways. And then I realize, oh, what is that? I can't believe that that's actually there. So
Mhm.
Dewey says, I think you get to a point where you realize that the feelings you have and the ideas that you have are all okay, but the behaviors of the family members and others around you may not be okay. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Dewey. Is that you get to the place where you realize there's something off and I need a different perspective. So we would just invite you to do that. And it takes investment of time and resources to get that healing done. Like you said, David, you can't read a book, you can't listen to a podcast. This podcast is going to point you in the right direction. It's not going to solve anything. So even if you
Right.
listen to the whole thing and you cheer and say, good job, I agree, the work that
Mhm.
you have to do, the work that I have to do, is to dig into my family story and begin to tell the truth and have other people see me, be curious with me, be kind with me, and reflect back to me the things that actually will change my life.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And it's again, it's a beneficial process for certain. And again, we have at the same time have to own our own choices along the way. But
Of course.
but understanding our own family dynamics, the family of origin dynamics that we have, and the things that they brought to the table, things that we brought to the table, are just again super important for processing as well as ongoing healing and quite frankly strengthening relationship. It will, what I've experienced is it will strengthen your relationship with everybody.
Mhm.
The more you understand and know yourself, and the more honest you can be with yourself, the better really your relationship and quite frankly your genuine care for others can become.
Don't you think too that the things that we experience that we act on later in life are a product of those early dynamics that we experienced in our families? So, yes, they are our choices and we own them, and they are the things
Hmm.
that we did as a result. But it also gives me more compassion and more kindness to make sense
Hmm.
of those later responses, those later behaviors that I have a lot of shame around. I think, well, I did this. Yes, I did it. And I own that I did
Hmm.
it, but there's
Hmm.
also a story behind why I did it, which is important to understand so that I can be
Absolutely.
kind.
Absolutely. Compassion for yourself, compassion and again, compassion and understanding is really key. And that's again, I think that's a part of the whole process. The idea of just digging up family stuff is not beneficial.
Yep.
But going through it and processing it, and again, developing compassion both for yourself as well as for others, I think is the name of the game. And that's what I see happening anytime I've been at one of the retreats, and anytime we've been in a group together. Certainly experienced that, and have experienced that other places too.
Yep. Well, it takes other human brains to offer that kind of kindness and care. So we just want to encourage you to do that work wherever you do that. Grateful for the guys who've engaged in this conversation. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably in the chat. We look forward
Mm.
to another exciting episode on Wednesdays and Fridays next week at noon Central, so we can process through it. Just smash that like button if you haven't already done that before you leave. We got a bunch of guys on the call right now, so thank you for being here. And
Mm,
David, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful that you pinch hit and allowed Scott to celebrate his birthday and
mm.
contributed with your story and your insights for our community. Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it. Always glad to jump in here if possible. And again, I think it was a good conversation all the way around. I hope it was beneficial to everybody that listened, and both live as well as on the podcast. So again, thanks for your trust in me, and glad to be here.
All the time, brother. So we always want to celebrate the community of men that we have together and how we get to engage right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too.
See you soon, everybody.